All right, my friends, welcome back to another episode of The Build Show. This is the real rebuild. We're re-looking back at my house. Today's episode 6. We're going to be looking today at floors, at doors, at trim and paint. Basically, everything that happens post-drywall. Now, I'm a little bit different than some builders in that I like to install my hardwood floors right after drywall is done. So we're going to be looking at that process, and then we're going to jump right into interior trim. We're also going to move from the studio today back over to my house and actually show you how some of those finishes are looking here 2 years later. So with that being said, Real Rebuild, episode 6. Let's get going. The Real Rebuild, a Build Original series, is brought to you by James Hardy. This episode in particular is sponsored by Huber. Let's get going. All right, guys, before we jump into the floor install, I want to take a bit of a rewind and show you what we did on an insulation detail. Now, we looked at this briefly on another episode, but my house has an original slab. You know, we reused the 1970s slab. And then on top of that slab, we used 1.5 inches of Halo Interra foam, followed by 2 layers of 3/4 Advantec subfloor. Now that 3/4 Advantec subfloor is what we call a raft slab. It's basically floating on top of that insulation, and we glued and screwed that Advantec to each other, but it's not fastened to the floor below. And I got to tell you, now that I've been in the house 2 years, it's unbelievable. It's got a little bit of cushion. No one has any idea that that's not a concrete slab, and yet my floors are warm because they're insulated. I don't have that slab pulling the heat out of my feet in the wintertime. And with just a little bit of cushion, my floors feel fantastic. Now, I got to give a big kudos, though, to Huber. You know, this is a heavyweight, heavy-duty type detail with 2 layers of 3/4. That means I've got 1.5 inches of subfloor underneath, and that also means that I could have gone with a real traditional nail down floor. I ended up doing a glue down floor, but I could have easily done a standard nail down floor, and that Advantec has been rock solid. Now, if you notice from the videos, I actually have the yellow version, which you may not be familiar with. It was a brand new product 2 years ago. It's becoming more and more standard. You're seeing it in more and more markets, but Huber calls it X Factor. It's basically an advanced version of Advantec. That same Advantec that we've come to know and love. I've been using it since 2006, I guess was the first time I used Advantec. But now it's got this coating on the top, kind of a yellowish coating, which feels a little bit like the zip system coating. It's adding additional waterproofing benefit, but the big deal is it's making the house really easy to clean and look nice. It also is really nice to be able to mark and make notes or whatever you need to on the floor, because it doesn't kind of go away in that standard Advantec. It really shows up on this floor, and of course it made the perfect substrate for me to move on to the hardwood floor. So that being said, let's jump into my hardwood floor install. We're starting upstairs on the second floor of my house. We're using a really cool product, but you know what? Hardwood floor is really important to get the prep right. Now, there's 2 types of prep. You're sometimes going for a level, you're sometimes going for flat. In my case, I'm not super worried about being level. This is new construction. If I'm a hair off of level, no big deal. But what I do want is a flat floor. And so Kristen Hardwood Floors, my local contractor that's installing these Delta Millworks floors, which, by the way, are available nationwide, has done an amazing job of prep. So let's start in my daughter's bedroom, and I'll show you what they've done over here. So first off, I did not cover my Advantec prior to sheetrock upstairs, which meant that I had a fair amount of prep that needed to be done up here. Now, they used a buffer with a very thick, heavy grit sanding pad. I think it was a 30 grit. Check this out, y'all. This is a 26 grit pad that the Kristen guys put in their buffer, Wilson and his boys. They did a quick buff of my floor. I did not cover these floors ahead of time, so they buffed them all down with this 26 grit. Look how nice that looks. And that's basically what you're left with right here, which is you're going to see that they got some of the top grain off, but there's still a little bit of sheetrock dust down into the corners. They also did a really good job of double checking there weren't any high nails, because they found a couple places where my seams needed just a little bit of sanding. That's not from swell necessarily, because you're only going to notice like 2 or 3 spots like that. But we did use a hand planer, pardon me, an electric planer in a few spots to do that. And we ran a giant level on the floor to make sure that it was as flat as possible. Now I did have a little bit of a kind of a depression in here, so we ran some floor leveler to fill that, and this has dried super fast, so same day install. I think that's the only spot that we needed to. We're walking down the hallway now to my boys' bedroom. Boys' bedroom, we did a little bit of prep as well. This room turned out great, so we didn't have any problems here. So hardwoods are prepped. Let's get into it, and we'll pick up the video as we get started. Wilson and his crew from Christnick doing a great job over here. This is my first round of boards. Look how pretty those are. Love it, Wilson. So we're using glue on this, and they've nailed this starter strip. This is the long hallway that goes down basically a continuous board from the top of the stairs. They've run a chalk line to run that glue so they don't go too far and get it everywhere. And then watch Wilson beat this thing in place. He's done this before. He's got a nice clean rubber mallet. I saw those guys cleaning off their mounts at the beginning of the day, make sure they're nice and clean. Here's Emma running the next run right here. They're staggering the seams. Make sure those seams are nice and staggered. First room is done. This looks so nice. Now that we're done, the first thing we're gonna do is cover this immediately. You can see some dust marks from our drywall coat feet, but we're gonna cover this thing up with some ram board. And you're noticing that we didn't quite run it tight to the floor. This is a little tight here in this direction, but in this width direction, we've run it with at least a ½ inch or so down the wall to leave some expansion and contraction room. That's best practice. Even though this is an incredibly stable floor, we want to make sure that we've got some room for expansion and contraction. So ready for some ram board. Looking good. All right, day 2 of my install. Wilson's prepping the entire floor. Is almost done. And below this is a concrete slab. And then if you saw my videos, I put 1.5 inches of halo insulation down. And then there's 2 layers of 3/4 plywood. So this Advantec, which you see running this way, has another layer of Advantec running horizontally. And it's glued and screwed to each other. You can see I've got screw marks here, and then I used Advantec glue underneath that. So I've got a very, very flat floor. Wilson's running a around a 30 grit sandpaper on here just to make sure that everything is nice and clean, basically. So his glue has something to stick to, no dirt, no junk on there. And look how nicely it's cleaning up. I mean, it's beautiful. It's leaving a little bit of a yellow film, or yellow dust, I should say, that they're cleaning up. But they laid the entire second floor of the house yesterday. I suspect they'll lay the entire first floor today. Let's talk about Huber products for a minute on my house. You know, I used Advantec subfloor, both upstairs and downstairs on this house. I've been using Huber Advantec exclusively on my build since 2006. I had a plywood problem on my very first build as a custom builder in 2005, where I had some delamination and some seams that had gotten wet that I had to sand off. I switched to Advantec because I heard that it was going to withstand rain better and I wouldn't have that sanding issue. I've never looked back. They've been that's been an incredible product. Now the zip system, I got to tell you, when I first heard about this system, when it came to the market, gosh, I don't know how long it's been ago now, 15 years ago or so, I thought, I don't know about this, a tape-based system. I was concerned. I didn't think that it would be a good system. And I saw some testing that happened about 10 years ago now at the University of Texas Construction Durability Lab, which really changed my mind. They showed how incredibly durable, UV resistant, and just how the Huber zip system in general outlasted the competition in this durability test. And I was sold. And then fast forward a couple years, I started reading some articles that both Jake Bruton and Steve Basic were writing in some trade publications, and realized they were using Zip System to get some incredible results on houses, not just from a waterproofing perspective, but from an air tightness perspective. And that's really what turned the corner for me, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. And for me to use the Zip System sheathing on the outside of this house, use all their products, their family of products, including Liquid Flash, it's made an incredibly tight house for my family and I, which has led to a really comfortable house, a really resilient house, and a really healthy house. You know, if I'm able to really tighten the envelope, the exterior on this house, that means that I don't have pollution and allergens and pollen and all that other nasty stuff that's often in the Texas outdoors coming in to my house through gaps and seams and cracks. Also means that I've had a very bug-free house. I've not used any professional bug service since I moved in, and I've had 0 problems at this house. Whereas across the street where I used to live, I had a quarterly spray going on all around the house, and I always had issues. Bugs were finding their way in. So this house, using really kind of off-the-shelf parts and pieces, a lot of Huber Zip System products, I've found to be an incredible house for my family. And I also, lastly, really like that if you're new to the Zip System, or let's say your first house is a Zip System house, you've not done it before, you can really tell on the outside, just from a glance, whether the details have been done correctly. And, oh, by the way, if there's a mistake or if there's a problem, it's very fixable. It's really easy to tell what the problem is on the outside and make that change or correction. So with that being said, Huber's been an incredible company to work with. Their products are absolutely top notch. I think game changers in the industry, and I really recommend these guys. All right, guys, let's take a minute and talk about these woods. Now, this is a European oak, and what's amazing about it is that, gosh, I have yet to see a board with any bigger of a knot than that one right there. It's all pre-finished, which has been fantastic for my schedule. You know, the crew finished the entire second floor in one day. And if you look at the profile on the floor, check this out, very thick wear layer on the top, which means I can sand this several times, and then very tight plywood in the center. That's it. No footballs in that core, lots of plies, nice and stable. And then if you flip this floor over, which you can see at the top of these bags, it's the same wood on the top, or pardon me, on the bottom as the top, which is going to lead to ultimate stability on this floor. Very, very impressive product. They're going to start at the front door and work their way back. And we measured, because we're going side to side in the house, I thought that made the most sense to lay the boards. We did a really good measurement on the board because it's not quite 10 inches. It's actually like a 16th, or maybe somewhere between an 1/8 and a 16th shy of 10 inches in width. So we wanted to take that measurement from here to here. So we're going to start actually with just shy of a full board on this side, so that we'll have about the same on this side of the house. You got to really spend your time measuring, and Wilson and his crew have done an awesome job, extremely precise. All right, we're at the front door. The first bead of glue going down. Emma's done this before. This is not her first rodeo. Here's our MyPay Ultrabond Eco 975. Standard urethane adhesive for hardwood flooring. Interesting, they tape these together. I'm not quite sure why. I need to ask Wilson about that. All right, we're looking good at my front door. Check this out. Front door's right there. We got about half the foyer done. Emma's spreading. Wilson's nailing down, or not nailing down, he's rubber malleting down. I was thinking the other day, when sometimes when I think hardwood floors, some of us, including me sometimes, when it comes to pre-finished, have this Bruce hardwood floors kind of mentality. I'm sure Bruce has gotten a lot better, but when I installed them in the 90s, it was a production builder floor. And those floors in particular, when you had a a gap between the floors, there was a pretty good bevel. And clients get upgrade to a micro bevel, but it was not flat. And what's amazing about this floor is that it's totally flat. The other thing that production builders love about pre-finished floors that custom guys typically shied away from was, well, two things. Number one, you couldn't get the exact finish you want, and that's not true with these. I was able to totally customize with Rachel Paxson, my interior designer, to get this exact color, sheen, everything, and then they were boxed up and shipped here. But again, these are totally flat, so when they get rubber mounted into place, there's nothing to trip. There's nothing you're going to see on this floor to give it away that this is not a site finish floor. And Chris Nick's done a ton of site finish floor for me, and I've loved them in the past. In fact, I've been a bit of a snob on site finish floors because I love them so much. But in this case, we've got a floor that totally kills the schedule. It's awesome. I'm knocking this floor out. Wilson and his crew are knocking my entire house with the hardwoods, 2,300 square feet of hardwoods, in 2 days, done. No need to come back and sand and finish. So now I can come in with my benchmark crystal cabinets and install them here in the foyer. I can put all my base mold down later and not have any additional shoe moldings or other frilly pieces that I need to kind of cover that gap up. Again, you're going to notice that Wilson's maintaining some gap between the wall and the floor to allow for a little bit of expansion. Although I think that this floor, as stable as it is, it's not going to see any expansion or contraction. All right, as we've got a long portion of the house coming up, they've run to the here, and the house is about a 1/4 inch out of square, so they ran a string line from this side all the way to the other. Tweak these two boards, and we're gonna move just a hair from here over. That way when we get out to this wall and land at this door, we'll have a nice straight board. Just finishing up. These guys are tired. Woo! Look how good that floor looks. We've already covered the entry. We're going to cover the rest of the floor with some ram board. But man, it is looking really good. I think you guys caught what I'm doing next on trim, but just to verify, I've got this shiplap going down that's going to end right at the floor there. They just have a little bit more to finish. And then my cabinets are coming next week. All my baseboards will come after that. So amazing job by Chris Nick and beautiful product by Delta Millworks. Okay, y'all, one of my absolute favorite features of the house, and I knew it was probably gonna be one of my favorites, has been this right here. So if you saw any of the videos from the trim side, we did a bunch of wood ceilings. I've loved them, but one of the things that allowed me to do was hide the staircase right back here. So this is my magic stair. Now, I knew I was gonna love it, and the coolness factor is definitely there. Check this out. Just kind of drops down from the middle of nowhere. So I love the hidden and the cool factor, but to be honest, it's the actual function that has been phenomenal. 100% reliable, had zero issues with this thing since it's been installed. By the way, all their pricing is transparent. You can go to their website and see how much these things cost. And really any smart finish carpenter can install one of these. It's just that easy. And now I've got a real staircase with a true handrail and a 45-degree angle. Follow me up. Let me show you this. On the last video, we talked about my rock wool insulation, and making a conditioned attic space has been a total game changer for me. You know, we're in a slab on grade situation here in Texas where we've got rock 6 inches below the surface. So digging a basement would be all but impossible. I'd literally have to hoe ram or blast for multiple weeks to get a basement in here. As a result, going up, putting all of your ductwork in the HVAC space, the air conditioned space, and creating this air conditioned attic has been amazing. We've got storage for everything. You know, I've got a bunch of kids, so having all our luggage lined up and ready to go, just walk right up the stairs, super cool. On the magic stair front though, one thing you need to remember is when we press the up button on these stairs, in fact, let's do it because I've got a upstairs remote. Let's see, put them up. When these stairs come up, you're gonna see that they're gonna park right into this space right here. It looks like we've got some Christmas decorations in the floor, but so you have to outline this space and say, hey, don't put anything in there. If you were to put a piece of luggage here, it would hang up the stairs and you'd have to spend a little time and effort to get them unhung up. You know, this is just a pretty basic opener system. It's not intended to force things. But with the stairs up, you can see how much space they take up. Not bad at all, just this center section. So I just took some tape and taped it off, and they provide some signs for you. But check out this storage space. So we're in the air-conditioned, heated space of the house. The rock wool is all exposed. I use these just because my inspector wanted me to make sure that I was using enough support, so I probably could take those down. I haven't had any problems. But you know, if you go to a traditional attic insulated with, let's say, blown fiberglass, I go up there and I immediately wish that I would have had a dust mask on when I went up, because I'm coughing for hours on end after that. This attic, on the other hand, no issues whatsoever. This is all exposed rock wool. I have had zero problems. And if I understand it right, the reason is these fibers are very heavy, and if I were to pound on this and get something to fluff off, it wouldn't stay aloft and airborne. It would fall pretty quickly to the ground because these fibers are heavy. Remember, this is made from rocks originally. So as a result, I've had zero dust up in the attic. I've had no problems. And as you can see, I've got lots and lots of storage space and good access to mechanicals. But back to the point on these stairs, I had to basically design this house with this attic space in mind. And at one point, I actually did a cross section with Steve Basic and said, hey, do I have enough headroom in that attic? I want to be up here in this attic space and have plenty of space here to be able to get about. Now, I knew I was going to be pinched as we got into the shoulders, but I wanted to get around the main space and have room for mechanicals plus storage. And having two gables was a really big deal. This window right here provides lots of natural light, which is awesome. I could easily turn these lights off and we'd still be able to see up here. The other thing these gables provide is spots for vents. I've got my fresh air on my north side of the house from my Zender fresh air system. I've got my exhaust going on the south side, which is arguably the quite a bit hotter side of the house. And by having a gable to push those through, I don't have to worry about a roof penetration for any of that. So I'm a big fan of having gable walls up in the attic. And this pitch on this roof is I think this is an 8 and 12 pitch. So now I've got a fairly steep roof, but lots of good attic space. That being said, magic stairs, man, these things have been awesome.
All right, gang, so the floors are down. We had a chance to go up in the attic and check out my awesome magic stairs, but let's transition to the trim stage. Now, this is normally done trim first, then floors much later, but at my house, I really wanted to drop everything, my floors, my door, my base, down without shoe molding. So that's why we put the hardwoods down. And then this is a pre-finished hardwood, so I covered everything complete. Now, when we jump into this trim stage, we're going to watch the video full interior trim install. We're going to jump around a little bit, though, because I really wanted to look at design choices in install. But these guys who did the finished carpentry on my house, some of my favorite people in the world. So let's go take a look.
And then you'll notice that all my doors, I think I talked about this in a previous video, all my doors are molded doors. These are from Geldwin. Let's see if I can pop these off. And I was able to specify when I ordered these the exact panel system that I wanted. This is a router carved door out of solid MDF. Look how nice that looks. So this has a chamfered edge here, and I made these 2 paneled doors, and I was able to specify how wide the stiles and rails were going to be. And my interior designer helped me with that, but I really like how this turned out. Everything kind of fits together nicely. And I had this style of molding in a 1930s Sears and Roebuck house that I lived in Portland a few years ago. This is called Greek Revival. And my friend Brent Hall, who's a kind of a historical craftsman builder, developed this line of moldings for Windsor One. So most everything you're seeing in the house molding wise is of that Greek Revival package. Now we did start though with the ceiling. You want to do those ceilings first, especially when you have a crown molding coming up to it. And this crown molding is also from that Windsor One Greek Revival collection. But we did the ceiling first. We also made sure we got all the cutouts correct for the ceiling. You don't want to miss any of those during that initial carpentry phase. And then we trimmed the windows, and this window trim is pretty straightforward. This jam piece is just a 1x material. This actually could have been poplar, I can't remember. Windsor One makes some jam material as well. And then this casing that goes around that has a bead on it is part of that Greek Revival collection. And what you're seeing here is a back band, is what they call this. And the nice thing about a back band is it makes this 3/4 trim actually 1 inch thick. So if you've got trim, or I should say doors that are going to the floor, now you don't have a flush joint. I try not to do flush joints wherever possible. When you have a flush joint, it's really hard to Bondo that and make it perfect. So I'd much rather have a reveal there, put a bead of big stretch caulk, and then call it good. And that's pretty much what we've done on all my doors in the house. In fact, you can see that if we back up right here. Here's that casing coming down. Here's that back band coming down. And then this is that Greek Revival base molding as well that I put in there. I mentioned this wood ceiling in my master. We have that same ceiling here in the foyer, the kitchen, and the dining room. This is hemlock from Delta Millworks. And we installed this from the front wall back. And again, because we have some long boards and we didn't always have things to nail to, we used a lot of that fast grab product. Oh, actually I have two right here. I believe this is leftover. Yeah, here we go. Power grab. Was I calling it the wrong thing? That's the one we use right there. And while we're talking about trim, before we get into that space real quick, let me show you what we did here. These are my only, I should make a video on this. I think you actually comment below if you're interested in seeing a video on this. I've got some different style doors going on in the house, but these are bifolds that will have linens here and then an upstairs laundry room on the other side. So I've got a stacking Miele washer and dryer in here. The other thing you're going to notice here, there's no vent out for this space because my stacking unit is ventless. Super excited about that. And then right here we've got a barn door that my guys made that will slide across and open up this space, which is kind of a hangout room, a place for a friend to sleep over and have a pull-out couch here. Some desks they could use as studies. So the boys actually have a bit of a suite. But here's what I did. This house could be a 4-bedroom. It's actually currently a 3-bedroom house. So that in the future, I could wall off where this barn door is. And right here where this closet is, I actually have, right behind this door, another door blank that I ordered when I ordered all my Geldwin doors. And that door is sunk into the wall cavity. So that I could wall this off, I could open up that door, it would swing into the closet right here, and then these doors would go away, and then I'd still have a closet, and then this would be its own separate bedroom, and this would be back to a 4-bedroom house.
All right, guys, you can see now the house is really coming together inside. We've got some great trim work and details. I've got pocket doors going in, but let's actually step out to the garage now and check out the epoxy floor. I got another YouTuber buddy of mine, Eric, to teach me how to do epoxy. And we didn't get a ton of footage on it, but you'll notice that I used pre-finished plywood on the entire interior of my garage, as well as a hemlock ceiling in there. So I was really looking for a sheetrock-free garage, and I think I've achieved it. This is a really cool looking space. Let's go check out that footage. Now the wood that you're seeing here, this is a specialty product. I got it from Delta Millworks. It's a hemlock, vertical grain hemlock. It comes in a tongue and groove 1x6, which is basically what you've got right here. So the guys are actually able to nail through the tongues, and that way when it's all put together, No visible fasteners on the whole ceiling. I was really excited about that. You're also going to notice that my walls are going to be this right here. This is a pre-finished maple plywood, and then my base on the garage is a PVC base. That's a Versatec 5/4 by 8 base mold that's laid first, so that if I'm power washing, if I'm scrubbing, or the cars are wet, I'm not worried about the bottom of the plywood getting wet. It's just going to be that PVC that's going to get wet. I'm excited about that look in the garage. And you'll also notice, just like the ceiling, I had my finish carpenter put this front wall plywood in before we hung the door. So this track is now through the plywood. The wire hide is through the plywood. And again, that's just some 3/4 maple plywood. I just did that as a finished wall so that now I can attach things to my wall. And it's also allowing me then to keep this garage fully insulated because, and that's a big reason why I wanted this insulated door, I've got a mini split head in the corner there where those wires are sticking out of the wall right there, where that Freon line is. I'll have a Mitsubishi mini split head on the wall there. And in the summertime, I'll set it to probably 80 degrees, so my garage will never be hotter than 80. In the winter, I'll probably set it to 60 degrees, so it'll never get very cold in the garage. My garage fridge and freezer will operate really well because they won't be in the extreme heat that you often have in garages. And I can use this space as a workshop or do whatever I need to out here. It's going to end up being a little bit of my man cave. That's why it'll be really nice out here.
So I think you're a better candidate for either epoxy or polyurethane or some coating that has the color in the coating itself, not in the concrete. That way.
So the coating is going to be on top then, and you wouldn't see all the nastiness underneath.
Correct. Now we're still going to prep it. Don't get me wrong. We're going to have to grind it. Typically, if you're doing stain, you don't want to grind because you need that cream on the surface. You know, you just need to profile it a little bit, just enough to get the sealer to stick.
Okay.
But you want the cream on the surface because that's what's going to stain.
Yeah.
All right. Here, we're not worried about it. We're going to grind it. Grinding is going to be the easiest, fastest, best way to get the profile that we need for that coating to stick. You want that coating to stick. Okay, so preparation is key, as you can imagine.
And speaking of prep, before you got here today, you gave me some directions. Talk me through what Andrew and I did yesterday in terms of general prep.
Right, so obviously, being 50 years old, you're gonna have oil stains, you're gonna have stuff that just has fallen on the concrete over 50 years. And so you guys use some daily clean. Just get you a good cleaner that can, you know, you want to get as much off of that concrete as possible. Yep. You're not going to get it all, but you want to get as much off as possible. You want to get a floor machine with a brush, a stiff bristle brush. That's what you want. Oftentimes you can use a pad, but I'm not
brush is even better.
I'm not a big fan of the pad because the pad just kind of floats on the surface, and you want to profile the concrete. And whenever you profile it, and then you use that chemical, you want to get it out. So if you use just a pad or a brush, you want to vacuum the water afterwards, okay? Again, here it's not as critical because we're going to grind it. Right now, you were just getting kind of the stuff off the surface, which you did a good job. I mean,
thank you.
But even then, there's still a lot of stuff behind. You know, there's a lot of paint. There's
yeah, we're seeing some garbage on the surface that didn't come out. Well, and we've got some of this kind of stuff happening too, right?
Right, and we're going to fix all that. And that's the beauty of doing a coating, right? If we were just simply staining the concrete, you could not really do anything to that because if you patch it, that patch is going to stain differently than the old 50-year-old concrete.
Right, whereas a coating is going to float over top of all that.
The color is in the coating itself.
And if you patch this, my assumption is you're going to patch first and then you'll grind to kind of feather that patch out so you won't be able to see
that's why I wanted you to clean it up. Now that it's clean, I can go straight to patching. Okay. After we get it patched up, we let it cure for a few days, maybe about a week or so. Make sure that concrete or that patch, we're actually going to be using a micro topping. And you want that to be well and cured so that when we grind it, it grinds nice and flat with the rest of the concrete. Grinding the floors, we need to profile the floors so that the epoxy can stick really, really good. Okay. Typically on new construction, as I said before, we can simply do an acid wash, but because this what is this, 50 years old?
Yeah, it's from the 70s.
Right, and I did some patchwork, then grinding was the best solution.
And talk to me about that grinder. That's a more industrial grinder. What's the grit of pad? What are they using to actually grind?
So that is a 30 grit. You can actually get down to about a 14 grit.
Is that right?
And
Rough.
but yeah, so the thing is, I had no idea what kind of concrete they use here. You know, they could have used like a 2500.
Yeah, who knows?
You never know, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't want to bring the 14 grit because I was afraid they would do too much damage.
Yeah.
Whereas the 30, if it doesn't do enough, well, then you just do multiple passes, right?
Makes sense.
And then you'll get there.
And now that we're done, you can kind of see what you've got here. It has a little bit of a swirl pattern in some of the harder spots.
Right.
In the softer spots, you got more sanding done. Is that right?
Yeah, so it profiled the slab really well, and now that's going to provide a really good surface for the epoxy to stick to.
Yeah, it's kind of toothing in, right?
Correct. You know,
Okay.
you have all those hills and valleys. That's just more surface area.
Makes sense. What's the next after this now?
Well, now we're going to finish cleaning it up really well. As you know, today we did not use water because the epoxy, you cannot have moisture.
Yeah,
And
no
we're trying to
moisture
get it
mess
done
up.
today. So what we did is we just did it all dry. We vacuumed all the dust. And now we're going to clean it out real well. We're probably going to take a leaf blower. Have to wear a mask. This stuff is bad stuff. So blow it all out. And then after that, then we can start putting down the epoxy and the chips.
All right, I'll meet you back when we get the epoxy started. All right, the excitement begins. Leroy got our part A, part B of the crown polymers all mixed. Talk us through what you got going on, Eric.
All right, so
there
we
it
got the
is.
epoxy mixed, and now we're gonna put it down. The thing about epoxy, it is 100% solids, so you don't want to dip and roll. You want to pour it right onto the concrete, and you want to use a notched squeegee
A notched squeezy.
Yep.
Interesting.
to spread it around. It's only got about these are 1/16 notches on this thing, and this is going to allow us to spread it evenly on the concrete, and then we're just simply gonna come back with a roller and roll right over.
Okay.
If you dip and roll, again, because it is 100% solids, it's not going to spread really well, and you may actually get roller marks, especially if it's
Got
a
it.
very hot day. So you want to use the notch squeegee. And this is literally all you do. Don't be scared.
I'm a little scared.
All right? You do that.
One little puddle to start with,
Yep.
and then he's
Push
going to
around.
kind of work it into all the places, isn't he?
See that?
And that 1/8 inch or 16th notch, it's not a lot of notch, but it's allowing some material to flow through and get a kind of a
Consistent coverage.
consistent
That's
coat.
what
There you
you're
go.
looking for. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect. Like I said, the roller's going to do the rest. But
Probably a good time for us to mention that Eric wanted to do this work prior to sheetrock, which makes sense because now we're not super worried about taping walls, being perfectly careful about edges. And that also means that I've got a little bit of forgiveness built into the system because once the sheetrock goes on the walls and I put base down, I've got about an inch and an eighth, or inch and a quarter, let's say, from that zip sheathing or from our studs to the final wall, so that that edge where he's epoxying out here doesn't need to be perfectly up against something, which ultimately is going to save us a fair amount of time in the end, right, Eric?
correct. So you want to work smart, obviously.
Well, a little epoxy goes a long ways.
Yeah. Like I said, that's the beauty about the squeegee as well. You can get very even coverage. Go ahead,
This looks
Leroy.
awesome.
Now Leroy can start cross rolling.
Crush rolling?
Cross.
Cross rolling. Sorry, misheard you. Okay, now what's the type of roller pad he's
So
using
we
on
are
there?
using a 3/8 roller. Hold on,
Okay.
we'll do it too. Okay. 3/8 roller. Obviously, you want a non-shed nap. You don't want it to shed.
Yeah, if
has
it
to
sheds,
be,
it's going to be there.
Yeah, you want it to be a solvent-based or solvent-resistant roller. So it has to be a quality roller.
Yep.
Bottom line.
And this gray epoxy that we're using here, Eric, could be a final coat if we wanted
Could be,
to, right?
Correct. But we are going to use this in order to get our chips to stick. So we're going to put it down, then we're going to come back and throw chips on here.
And with those chips, do we also need sand in there for slip resistance, or will the chips do that for us?
The chips is going to give you a surface. It's not going to be very slippery. Plus, this is interior. I don't like using sand if we don't have to, because it makes it really hard to clean.
Yep.
But No, the chips will give you plenty surface.
One thing I've got a question for you while you're doing this. You've got just a small crack in that slab right there. Will that epoxy cover that?
It will to some degree, but the chips
are going to really do it.
Really bring it home.
Got it. So when you're doing this, it's not perfectly level. Leroy's really doing the more final level with the roller.
This is just so you can spread it.
Yeah.
The main reason for the squeegee is so that you don't leave it too thick.
Yep, makes sense. What's our pot life?
It's not much. Today's a beautiful day, so it's
low humidity, not super hot.
About 75 degrees. So our pot life right now is probably about 30 minutes.
Okay.
But you want to maintain a wet edge at all times.
Yeah, you got to keep moving.
That is, you have to. Not only do you have to keep moving, you have to keep mixing. And you can't mix more than one kit at a time, so you have to time it properly.
And one kit is a gallon and probably a quart of Part B, something like that?
Half. The mixer's 2 to 1.
Okay, 2 to 1.
So it's 1 gallon.
So it's a half gallon of Part B and a gallon of Part A.
Correct.
From this particular Crown polymers. That may be slightly different depending on the manufacturer you end up using.
And you do want a 2-part.
I also want to mention that this is not an epoxy we're buying at the home center, the hardware store. This is from a pros store that would sell to individuals if you're watch rolling. Sorry, I misheard you. Okay, now what's the type of roller pad he's using?
We are using a 3/8 roller.
Okay.
3/8 roller. Obviously, you want a non-shed nap. You don't want it to shed.
Yeah, if it sheds, it's going to be there.
Yeah, you want it to be a solvent-based or solvent-resistant roller. So it has to be a quality roller.
Yep.
Bottom line.
And this gray epoxy that we're using here, Eric, could be a final coat if we wanted to, right?
Correct. But we are going to use this in order to get our chips to stick. So we're going to put it down, then we're going to come back and throw chips on here.
And with those chips, do we also need sand in there for slip resistance, or will the chips do that for us?
The chips is going to give you a surface. It's not going to be very slippery. Plus, this is interior. I don't like using sand if we don't have to, because it makes it really hard to clean.
Yep.
But no, the chips will give you plenty surface.
One thing I've got a question for you while you're doing this. You've got just a small crack in that slab right there. Will that epoxy cover that?
It will to some degree, but the chips
are going to really do it.
Really bring it home.
All about the chips we need to know, Eric.
Nope. Just
that's it.
That's it.
It's like man glitter.
There you go. Wow.
That's cool.
So that's all you do.
Throw them out.
Now, obviously, you can decide how much you want to do. I mean, you could say, you know what, that looks good. Just leave it alone. And that's the reason for using the colored epoxy. That you don't have to do 100% if you don't want to. You can literally just leave it like that if you like it.
I do kind of like that.
Okay. Well,
I don't know that it needs to be
all right,
1000% full.
We can do that.
I'm looking for a camo epoxy so that it kind of camouflages all the dirt and all the junk.
Okay. So, I mean, you can see that's fairly easy.
That is pretty easy. Look at that.
All right, guys, before we end the video, let's spend a little bit of time talking about paint. You're going to notice that I used Benjamin Moore Aura. This is a more expensive paint, but I found that especially in paint, you get what you pay for. There's certainly some other good choices on the market, but I've had really good success, I should say, with Ben Moore Aura. Now, you got to make sure that you're using the best accessories and the best labor when it comes to paint. So Gio, my painter, absolutely nailed the details. You're going to notice he used a lot of Big Stretch on my house. That's a product from Lexel that I've used for almost 20 years now and found that to be the absolute best in the industry. And that really fits the bill for you get what you pay for as well. Much more expensive than just basic caulking that you can find for painter's caulk, but absolutely worth it. When you're building houses to last, this is the right product. Let's jump in and show you a couple details from the paint.
This is critical to a really good paint job. So let's talk about the materials that we're going to use to prep with. When you look at this wall right here, you're seeing a lot of prep work, meaning this kind of pinkish stuff. We'll get to that in a second. But I do want to mention that anytime you're doing finish carpentry, there's always going to be somewhat of a gap between that carpentry and the paint.
And that's when you need a product like this. You need a painter's caulking. Now, quick plug for these guys. Not all painter's caulk is created equal. And about 15 years ago when I started my custom home business, an old painter got me turned on to this that at the time was hard to find. You couldn't find it at the big box stores. You only found it at a local hardware store. And I went and got what he asked me for the paint job. And I came back to him and said, gosh, that was really expensive. This was like, $6 a tube, let's say, when previously when I was working for a production builder, we were using $1.50 a tube caulk. And he said, you know what, son, you get what you pay for, and this is one that's really worked for me. Fast forward now 15 years later, I understand the science of why these are so much different in cost, even though this and another product might say the same things, but they're vastly different on both cost and performance. So for instance, Big Stretch by Sashco, one of the big differences is the cheap caulking that you see on there and this one, there's basically just a few components on there, and I'm boiling this down, but basically there's water in there. It's latex-based, water-based. There's going to be some latex material. That's kind of similar to Elmer's glue, basically. And then there's going to be, believe it or not, some other products in there as well, things like clay. And when you buy the cheap tubes, it's more than half the tube is clay, just regular old clay mined from the earth, and a little bit of latex and a lot of water. On the other hand, when you buy this tube, we've got a lot more of that expensive ingredient, and that's why this costs so much. I've been using this for, 15 years now and had really good success with it. And using a product like this means that when the house moves and changes and shrinks, this is going to shrink and move and change with it rather than showing the crack, which I spent a lot of time on callbacks on at that 1-year warranty period when I worked for that production builder. So in the end, spending a few dollars more per tube, huge difference, and it's going to save you on the back end on warranty. Now, one thing I do want to mention though is you don't want to use a micro bead of this. You want enough of a bead laid down that this product can do its job and move with you and actually stretch. If you're using just a tiny micro amount of this on a joint, you're going to have a hard time giving that product the ability to stretch if there's a tiny amount. So we want to use a proper amount of this and apply it properly. All right, so on the prep side of things, one of the things that's critical is for your painter to take the time to deal with all those little imperfections before any paint goes down. Now, typically builders talk about using Bondo, but there's actually kind of 3 products that we use and have used a lot over the years. First off, wood filler. Almost all the nail holes from a pneumatic gun, all those tiny little pinholes, those are all wood filler. And wood filler is great for that because it doesn't shrink and crack. Now, if you have bigger imperfections, like if you're filling a screw hole or if you've got a chip or a crack, here's one you can see we're working on in process right now on this barn door that we made for my kids' bedrooms upstairs. We're going to use Bondo. Now, Bondo is a little harder to use only in that it's a 2-part product, meaning I need a part A and I've got to put a hardener in there, and then we're going to sand it down, but it works really well for bigger things. Now, for smaller things, here's a secret that Gio gave me that I don't think a lot of painters know about, and that's another product from Bondo called glazing and spot putty. And almost all these smaller cracks that you're seeing and these minor imperfections that Gio's filled, he's used this. Now, this is a single component, single part, a little more viscous, a little more fluid than Bondo, and that's going to help get it in these minor things. So see that scratch right there that was on the wood? He was able to fill that, and then he's sanding and doing a real nice job of sanding and prep. You can see I've got some of that kind of pink dust on my hands. That's from sanding on this that we're going to, of course, get off before we paint. Okay, so finishing up on prep, as we talked about earlier, use those good products and really spend the time to prep the wall and look at the wall. You're going to see a good painter use a cordless light a lot. And in fact, I have a couple extras that he's been borrowing on my job because we really want to take a look at that wall in what they call critical light, which is that raking light. And so when you see the painter walking around with a light like this and really looking at the wall, you know that that prep job is going to be good. And in a room like this, seeing all the pink like this makes me really happy. All right, guys, now things are really getting interesting. You're starting to see the finishes come together on my house here, but we're almost done. The next episode, we're going to get into the real finishes, and then we're going to kind of do a wrap-up recap on episode 8. So stay tuned, guys. Super fun. By the way, if you're interested in going back and watching all... Gosh, I made like 50-some videos. There's a playlist, and so you can catch all those videos rather than just some of the clips that we've thought of as the highlights. That's going to be over on YouTube or on thebuildshow.com. With that being said, follow us on TikTok or Instagram. Otherwise, we'll see you next time on The Build Show.